Hey everyone, you are listening or watching the Overland podcast. Welcome to the show this week. This is the second show of 2025. I've got my co host Tony from Northwest Arkansas on here, and we have a very special guest, yes, all the way from Idaho, Edgar from Angry Owl Outdoors. Edgar, thank you for joining us.
You bet.
Uh,
What's happening?
Man, it's been a great week here in Arkansas so far. A lot of our listeners are from here because we have a lot of friends here, and we have endured the first snowpocalypse of the years we were talking about off air just a minute ago. Pretty much snow all the way around the state, and Tony got to see a little bit more than of it than I did. I saw it from my home, but you saw it
Uh,
from the
I,
seat of
s-
your vehicle, and
I was all up in it.
yeah, all
Yeah,
up in it. Yeah. Well, it was nice to see you get out there and a lot of times I'm really not scared of myself and getting out in it. It's the other people that I don't really care about seeing because I don't trust them on the road.
yeah.
The last time we got
That's
this, I
always
went
the
out
case.
into the Ouachitas to see things, and there was a Jeep out there with street tires. And after the third time I pulled him out of the ditch, I said, "I'm going home. I just can't do this." It was just not very fun. So anyway, it's been a pretty fun week seeing a white state instead of a green state or a brown state, and I really enjoyed that. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's not often you see the snowfall we had this last week.
well, it was neat seeing the pictures of y'all up there around the propane fires, and I think I could hear the diesel heaters all the way down here from
Yeah,
100 miles away. They were
yeah,
cranking.
yeah. Caleb had a pop up, kind of an oversized pop up tent set up,
Yeah,
with the propane heater. We went in there and warmed up, but there were some fires going outside, and then of course the diesel heaters.
yeah, diesel
Uh,
heaters. I like listening to them. They kind of lull me to sleep a
yeah.
little bit. Do you have you Edgar, have you experienced diesel heater much up there with you, or are you still you just stick to the wood burning stove you have in your tent?
Pretty much wood burning. I've seen some of those rigs and setups with old diesel heaters, and I thought because I have that Ford Excursion that every so often I'll car
Mm,
camp out of, and I got the whole rear end ripped out, and that was supposed to be me and my wife's kind of travel camper. And I
mm-hmm.
thought, I saw some of the setups on those. I was like, that's pretty slick. I was like, to have that, and especially she would really like that because these times when I'm like, it's fine, and it drops down to like 35 in the cab. She's not too keen to go
Yeah.
with me. I don't blame her. But, yeah,
Yeah.
I think those little setups would be pretty slick.
Oh, they're nice. It got down probably in the 20s, and Tony told me that he was hot this weekend.
Uh,
So
Friday night it was 14,
okay, I knew it was a little colder
and
up there where
yeah,
you were, and
and
you said that you had windows open and all that other
oh
stuff. So
well, yeah. Friday night I didn't have the windows open, but Saturday night I did. It was only about 30, so wasn't quite as cold Saturday night, but it was nice. I slept in my underwear both nights. I mean, I was
it's hard to beat
just
that.
comfortable. Yeah.
Hard to beat that, especially when the only problem is you eventually have to go outside, and it's
Nope.
yeah,
Nope.
it's
Not
tough out.
anymore.
It's tough to
I
go
don't.
out
I don't go out there. Well, in the mornings, but if I got to go to the bathroom, I've learned your trick. I don't do
there.
that no more.
Well, it took you several years to buy into my portable urinal trick, so
Hmm.
yeah, that's one
Is
of the
that the
things.
Nalgene model?
It's not. We actually graduated. I was telling the nurse at my school about the issue and having to get a Gatorade, wide mouth Gatorade bottle because I don't want to have to climb. We have rooftop tents, I don't want to have to climb down a ladder and climb back up and climb down. And she said, "Have you ever heard of a portable urinal?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Just go on Amazon, look up portable urinal. There'll be 1,000 of them on there." And he said, "It'll change your life." And it did. It really did. So,
Yep. I've
flat
got.
bottom, flat
Hmm.
bottom. It sits. You don't have to worry about it turning over or spilling or anything like that. It is a life changer. So,
Yep.
as long as you have a tent that you can get up on your knees in, or in your case, stand up in, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it is a
I'll tell you
life
what,
changer.
just don't forget, like I've done before, using the Nalgene trick and dump it in the morning. seal it back up, and then just get home from camp and everything's drying out, forget about it, and then say about a month later, see that bobble and pop it open, about to make you pass out. That's,
True. Been there, done that. Been there, done that. That's a tough one. You have to run it through the dishwasher a few times if that happens, or bleach is your friend, and so you can get that done. Oh my goodness. Jasper Jeep Jam is on here. We got them coming up in March.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like the
Jasper
third
Jeep
week of
Jam
March or
Overlanding
something.
Rally. Jasper, Arkansas. I saw where they got out this weekend and met a tree. So congratulations! You get a new right front. Was it a mud guard or what? What do y'all
it's
Jeep
a
guys
fender.
call
I
that?
think he's in a lot worse shape than I was. I didn't have any damage, but I think he's got 2 fenders, and I don't know. There's yeah.
That's something.
That was pretty.
That's
lucky.
something, boy. I tell you what, when you start sliding, there's just you're just at the mercy of wherever you are. So it's kind of like being on skis.
Yep.
Well, hey, I'm excited about our guest this evening as we do this live recording of the show. I've been following Angry Owl Outdoors for a while now, and when we talked to Blackbeard Fire Starters, I think Edgar, you came on there and commented, and they said this guy is the real deal. He is the real deal. So I said we got to have him on. Got to have him on. So Edgar, I appreciate you being on here, coming to us from the beautiful country of Idaho, and I'm excited. My wife and I will be going there this summer, and we'll be coming across there, and I'm excited. I never been to Idaho. It's one of my places that I've never stepped foot in before, and I do believe that it is probably, in my opinion, the most underrated state in the United States. It is absolutely outrageous, beautiful. So. Appreciate you coming on. Would you take just a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and let's get to know you a little better.
You bet. Yeah, Edgar Ray. I run a channel, actually, what you just mentioned, Angry Owl Outdoors, and that's been fairly recent. But grew up here in Boise, Idaho, and my folks were from here, and my wife's family, so we're all kind of centralized here. Haven't moved too much through my youth. Pretty much stayed here and just played in the mountains, and that's where I got addicted. I was before the show, we were just talking about the state. We've got north of Boise, you've got thick mountains, lakes, rivers. I mean, you name it. And to the south, we've got high desert. So you've got just about anything you want to do from, you got plenty of overlanding areas, hiking, biking. I mean, it really is just kind of the catch-all state. When I was doing park ranger work, we bounced around Colorado and a few other areas and did some training in Washington. And we thought, where do we want to end up? What park do we want to end up at? And it was always back home to Idaho, because everywhere we went, there was just a little piece of, I felt like every state you could take a little piece out and like, oh yeah, we got that over here. Or we got this up here. You got the wet region up north. You got the dry in the south. So I feel pretty blessed in that sense to have those opportunities around me and just a lot of beauty. But yeah, other than, like I mentioned, for work, I haven't moved around too much in the past few years, and I did a little stint there for a while as a park ranger, and got into survival and bushcraft and camping along the way, and just kind of grew up with some of those skills, a little bit of Boy Scouts, just kind of the thing everybody would do here. So dip my toes in that, and yeah, pretty much all my family's here, so not really much reason to leave. I get tempted to check out your guys' neck of the woods and this foreign territory to the west, pretty much, to the east, pretty much east of Colorado, is just, it's a mystery. I hear of these things. You guys have hardwoods. You don't have dirty pine you have to burn, and all this seriousness. So, but yeah, that's love the outdoors. Love challenges. That's kind of how a lot of what started with the channel is. I like to challenge myself with stuff. I'm a follower of God, believe in Jesus Christ is my savior. And so I try to represent that in my life and my work and through the channel. And, I hear back and forth. It starts good conversations with people. So it's a good outlet just to be who I am. So,
right. That's nice. Cool. I love people who have an appreciation for their home state. As much as my wife and I travel, when we come back to Arkansas and go around in the different parts of the state, we just sit back, and we think we've got it really good. and a great appreciation for where we live. And I know not all states are that way. If you're from Kansas, I don't know what in the world you would brag about, but when you're from a beautiful state, you appreciate. And I take that back. I love Kansas. Especially driving back from Colorado, you get really good gas mileage because you're going downhill and you have a 40-mile wind at your back. So
there's always a plus somewhere. You
always
find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Idaho, I love getting suggestions from home state people, from locals, and like I said earlier, my wife and I will be going through there next summer. What are some of your favorite places there that you like to visit? That give us a heads up.
Two there. Well, if you want to hit all the regions, which I think you should, you got to hit the wet region to the north. So Lake Pend Oreille is by far one of my wife's favorite areas to go to. It's one of the, I think, top 3 deepest lakes in North America. They used to test naval subs out of there. I believe my great uncle, actually, he was a frogman, or before they called them seals.
Mm-hmm.
Did some testing up there, and they still got the history there. You can see it, go through a museum. It's very, very cool area. And the park is called Farragut State Park. It sits right there on Lake Pend Oreille, and you can get rentals and stuff overlooking the lake. But there's cliff jumping. There's everything you can think of there, and just thick, lush forest. So that'd be my number one for the north. For mid, I'm very fond of McCall. That's just about 2 hours north of Boise. And that's actually where I finished out my park ranger career, at the park there, Ponderosa State Park. You got to check that out. But Payette Lake, beautiful, beautiful area. And I mean, you can get as rugged as you want from there. You can break off trails galore and get into some thick, thick stuff. Lots of cool hot springs. And then south, pretty much anything south of Bruno, you get into the Canyonlands, and that's some legit overlanding. Mm-hmm. You can get kind of lost and twisted around. You got the Owyhee River, and that's one of the rivers too. I think you do 7-day floats down that. Once you're in, you're pretty much in, because you're not getting out, unless you have some serious equipment to get a rig back there. So that kind of gives you all three aspects. But I mean, you can just keep. There's so many roads and so many old logging roads and just routes to get around and explore and find ghost towns and homesteads and old mines. And like I said, hot springs galore. So keep those 3 in mind. Those will be my top 3. And obviously you got to swing by here and I don't know if you drink coffee. I'm actually drinking tea right now, which is very surprising.
No. Oh my goodness.
No, we don't drink coffee.
Do we drink coffee?
I mean, it's Joey's fault. I started drinking coffee at night. I'm not actually drinking it tonight. I'm just drinking water. But
that's your own fault.
Mm-hmm.
That's your own fault. I brewed me a cup right before we started.
See, that warms my heart, because whenever I tell people around here that I drink coffee at night, that's always my come down, is I just have a nice brew before bed. Like, what are you doing drinking coffee before bed? And I said, I thought that's what people do. Like, we'll be watching a show, and if I see somebody, we were watching Home Improvement, an old rerun the other night, and he was like, hey, you want a cup of coffee in the evening? I was like, oh, man, I need to go get me a cup of coffee. So anyways.
Yes.
Well, I've got it good because my wife can't handle caffeine. And so we've got a real big stock of regular coffee for me and decaf for her. So if I want one late at night, I'll just make some of her coffee or decaf, and it don't affect me either way. But anyway, it makes me feel better knowing that I'm not caffeinating myself right before bed, even though I am right now. It's fine. I can deal with it either way, because I think my body's immune to it by now anyway, as much as I've had. You mentioned in your about section of your YouTube channel that you previously served as a park ranger, like you said, with National Park and State Parks. And during that, you said you were EMT, search and rescue, forest management. You get some great training with those things, and working on your skills, able to did those skills that you obtained with that, or were you able to transfer that to your personal hobbies of what you're doing now with your outdoor channel?
Oh yeah, definitely. So leading up to it, and what's funny is kind of what even led to me, we kind of alluded to it before the show, but what made me even think of being a park ranger is me and my Yellowstone, and we were on the west side of the park, just stayed at a little, drive-in campground, and we woke up in the morning. Well, actually, hopefully she's okay with me sharing this. She got up in the middle of the night, had to run to the bathroom, And she comes back, and we were sleeping. I had I think it was a 96 Toyota, like a T100 style. And we just sleep out of the back of that and pop open the little hatch. She went to the bathroom, came back. She goes, I just saw a gigantic eye, like over by this. I don't know what I saw. I saw a gigantic eye looking at me, some kind of creature. And she crawls around. I'm like, you're half asleep. But we get up in the morning, we just hear, all around the truck. And we're just surrounded with buffalo all around us. And there's a park ranger there. Everybody stay in your tents, stay in your cars. And I mean, back of that Toyota, you're seeing them go by, and they're above the top. They're just huge. They're mammoths. And she looked at me and she was like, "See, yeah, it was a gigantic eyeball." And I'm like, "Yeah, you were right on that." But I saw that guy, and I was like, "That's a job. You can do that as a job. I'm going to go herd buffalo or do whatever." And that's when I started looking into it and looked up some academies, because you had to go through law enforcement training, and you get federally certified, all that fun stuff. So I found a academy in Washington, in Skagit, at Mount Vernon. So got all geared up. But part of my preparation for that is they said, get as many certs as you can. So half of that was self-funded, that I wanted to learn as much as I could. So put myself through the EMT basic training, and then did other certs like swiftwater rescue, some incident command, like advanced incident command systems, ICS. I know you're familiar with that. And then even man tracking. There's a guy, I think, I don't believe he's around anymore, named Joel Hardeen, and he was one of the top man trackers in the West. Anyways, awesome training, like legitimate. He would go out, and you'd go out in the early morning and track a person, through the desert just by their footprints. And so all that kind of geared me up for the actual academy. And then in the academy, we got all our, obviously, law enforcement training and how to deal with people in, rough situations when you're in the mountains, because it's one thing in the town, but you get into rural and you get to these areas where parks people just show up and they just want to have fun. They just, their brains go out the door. They think, we just got to get there. We got to get on vacation. And kind of one of the universal things was seeing folks pull up, and a campground on opening day or on a Friday is the unhappiest place in the world, because you have all these people showing up trying to back in huge rigs, and they're just fighting. You got spouses fighting, and it's like, guys, relax, look around you. This is beautiful. And then the next day, they're as happy as can be and offering you coffee, and everybody's copacetic. But it's just a different world. So we did a lot of forest management, and I had taken some fire ecology and that kind of stuff beforehand. So all of that really set me up, because really having those opportunities to do medical calls and search and rescue and just dealing with people who are confused or unprepared really geared my mind to have this preparedness mindset and kind of a survival aspect, because you'd see these situations go south like that. I mean, people are having the time of their life, and then somebody either perishes or gets severely injured, or you're doing a rescue to where people are shocked when a couple of the stories I have, if you don't show up with a helicopter, they think, where's the helicopter? And you're like, you're down in the middle of a 2,000-foot canyon. We're either carrying you out, or we're going to work through this. And I think, especially now in a society where you can get anything you need just like that. And if you can't, it's somebody else's fault. It's never my fault. It's somebody else's fault for not providing it for me, is kind of the mentality. So that definitely carries over to parks, because they're like, well, you're a national park or state park. You're a ranger. You're supposed to take care of me, essentially. And people go in reservoirs when they don't know how to swim and drown and all, you name it from there. And so that really did carry over, because when I started doing the channel, well, even before doing the channel, when I started doing these trips, I called them misery trips, and I can get into that later if you want. It was just to kind of challenge myself. And I kind of go nuts with preparation because of seeing what can go wrong and how quickly it can go wrong. So I'm the guy that has my truck. If me and my wife go north to visit friends, I got it loaded up so ridiculous. I'm like, we're just going up for a day or 2 days, but I know the storms here. I know what can change. I've seen things go south, and there's a guy named Morris Kachansky, and in the bushcraft community, he's kind of known as like the father of bushcraft. He was a Canadian guy, and he wrote a book called Bushcraft. And one of his sayings was, the more you know, the less you carry. And that's kind of a big saying in the bushcraft community. And I almost feel like in some cases, the more you know, the more you carry, just because you see what can go wrong in that sense. So anyways, that's a long drawn out answer with a lot of pinpoints all over the place of all of that really set me up to, I don't know if it's to do well, but it's just to know what I need to have on hand. And I'm always learning. I'm always realizing that was dumb. I shouldn't have done that, or I need to carry this next time. So, but I have a good experience of knowing what can go wrong and what you need with you.
Do you ever think about what's the rule that Joe goes by? Is it 2 is 1, 1 is
2
none?
is 1, 1 is none. Yeah.
You ever subscribe to anything like that?
Yeah, that is definitely the case, and that's a problem. That's why my kids and my bag, I end up, people are like, oh, how heavy is your backpack? And I'm like 60, 70 pounds, and then plus the sled, because I had a buddy show up on a trip once, and he goes, why do you have so many gloves for just this single night? I'm like, because they either get saturated or I burn them next to the fire, and I'm just because I'm an idiot and I try to warm stuff up. So a lot of it is self-induced stupidity. But yeah, the always having two and having a backup is, that's necessary.
Well, you stated earlier that you grew up there in Idaho, going experiencing and exploring the mountains. What's your earliest memory of being out in the wilderness?
Oh man. So my dad would, there's a little town called Featherville and Pine, north of Idaho. North of Boise, in the kind of central part of Idaho. And there was a reservoir up there and just a little town back up in there, an old mining community. And I don't know if you guys have dredge ponds or old dredge area. And it's where around here, the way they used to mine was basically they'd either use water cannons or they'd use dredges. And the dredges would go through, and they're these huge buckets. They're basically a barge that would go through and scoop in ponds, and they would dig their way through. They just keep scooping, and all that rock would carry up through those buckets, go into a tumbler, and then they'd spit out and get the rough gold and whatever they could harvest out of that. Well, we've got these huge swaths of land where you go now and there's just boulders, river rock essentially piled up. I mean, just mountains of it. And you can see where they've just mound here, and they just traverse down these valleys. And every so often you can find an old dredge. Those are really cool. But so this area had a bunch of those, what we call dredge ponds. So as kids, we'd go up there. My dad and mom would take us up there, and they had a camping spot. My dad was friends with the owner of the town, kind of owner. He was ran the bar and the community store and all of that. And we had a spot we could put our camper. So I think I was probably around 5 or 6. And so we would just tool around in the mountains there, and they'd set us free. And I'd go out with my brother, and he'd shoot whistle pigs. And I guess a whistle pig is a local term for kind of a prairie dog, but it's not quite a prairie dog. And it's just a barn that eats up everything and creates holes. And it's really bad for livestock because they'll break legs. And so he would shoot those, and we could take it down to the bar, go in the bar and put it in the freezer. And he would get 25 cents or 50 cents from the bar owner because he raised bobcats. So he had this big pen outside of his house with all these bobcats. So we'd go shoot the whistle pigs and squirrels and take them to them for bobcat food. And so we just
raised bobcats.
Spent our time running around, shooting, fishing, climbing, exploring. There was old bomb shelters to go explore, and kind of, we just kind of had free reign. And so I think that's kind of what just instilled in me a love for the outdoors, because it was just this freedom, this absolute freedom, and the smells, the sights, and just that you can get into an adventure immediately. You step out and you're just like, I'm going to go to the top of that mountain. I'm going to go explore that river. I'm going to lift up this rock. And as a kid, still, that's what I do. Drives my wife crazy, because if we go out, I can just stare at trees and just like, oh, look at that. We took a trip to the redwoods and one time, and I was just like, look at this one. She's like, yeah, it's like the other one. It's really big. And I'm like, no. This one, it's huge. It's amazing. And so I'm just fascinated by creation and just like the intricacies that are there. So yeah, as a little kid, we did that a lot, and my dad was always out cutting wood and logging. He did a lot of logging, so that kind of tied in, or learned how to make fires and cut wood and play with an axe from a very early age, down to 6 or 7, would be splitting wood and getting it ready for the fire. And that was one of your chores, go split wood. And
Yeah.
you learn how to make fire. It just kind of goes hand in hand. But
That's cool.
those and just kind of day drives, that's what we do as a family, was just go explore and take day drives. And so, yeah.
That's neat.
Recently, I learned how to do the I don't know if I've got the term right here, but it's an upside down fire. Now,
Yeah.
I noticed on your channel, you had a video, or at least a thumbnail video. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but just in the last year or so, I learned about those, and it's kind of fun to build your fire upside down, and you start it and you walk away, and it's just, you turn right around and it's just going, like, it's crazy.
Yeah. They are made. That's like the number one. If I recommend people to learn a fire, like especially in snow and wet conditions, and the first time, same thing. I built one. I was like, it's kind of funky. It's not going to work. And I mean, it manages itself. It's easy. And
I learned about it on TikTok.
That's where you learn everything.
What? How is this possible? No way this works.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did.
I know the government keeps trying to ban TikTok. That's where I learn all my cooking stuff. I learn everything on TikTok. They're gonna have to quit that. Anyway, back to it. In the outdoors in our world, people have what we call their thing, what they love. Some people love to camp. Some people love to wheel their vehicle. Some people like to pack raft or backpack, or some people are fishermen. You do a lot of things, but when you get into the outdoors, you kind of develop your thing, what you love to do the most. In your world, what you do, what would you say is your thing? What do you love to do the most?
Man, I mean, I do enjoy making fire. I just have always, and I'm not very good at it in the sense there's guys, it's funny because you got the camping community, the bushcraft, and the survival, and they're all kind of distinct in their own ways. And I'm just kind of a hybrid of all of them. I just like to toy around in each of them, but there's guys that can do crazy fire starting, on like primitive skills and all that. I just like making fires, because it's especially when I go out in winter, it is vital that I make a fire, and I usually have to keep it going all night. And there's just something about it a lot of times they shut down being able to make fires in the summer because we have all the wildland fires around us in the summer. So I don't go out very much in the summer because I feel like if I can't have a fire, I don't know. I feel like I'm not in the woods. I'm not in the wild. So for me, it's just making a nice, good fire, sitting in front of it. And that's really what's relaxing to me, because you can just stare into the flames, and there's something therapeutic about it, because it just sits there and it just, it's mesmerizing. It's probably like for people who live on the beach looking at the ocean and just hearing that rhythm. So really just that. And then I'm finding a steep mountain to climb up. I love bushwhacking. I don't like going on trails very much. I just like seeing a mountain. I'm like, I just want to go to the top of that. So that's kind of, in a weird way, what I enjoy doing. I like the challenge of doing hard things and going up something steep, and kind of this hope of maybe nobody's ever stepped foot here and I'm going to find an old flintlock or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anybody that inspired you along the way? Any books you read, movies you saw? Who inspired you to get into this?
Man, I mean, seeing my dad while growing up, when he would go out and cut wood, that was pretty inspirational in the sense of like, he just a beast of him, and he's still around. I'm saying it like past tense, but just would do some phenomenal tasks. And knowing too, he had a lot of pretty massive injuries and body injuries, but to him, getting out and cutting wood, carrying 2 chainsaws up a mountain and a bunch of wedges and just being like, I'm going to take down that tree, was kind of his challenge. And so I think it's funny because as you get older, you realize how much like your parents you are, and become more interested in what they did. And I'm realizing as time goes on that a lot of what he did was instilled in me just by watching him, kind of as a son does their father a lot of times. But just being around, reading a lot, Jack London was really big in my life as I was a kid, and I loved reading. So I loved reading adventure stories. Oddly enough, even books like from C.S. Lewis, the Narnia series, we grew up with those, and while they're fantasy, there was just something about going into this world, this magical world where it's all just either snow or woodlands and just kind of the way C.S. Lewis writes with this descriptive, kind of like Lord of the Rings, the same thing. Like it puts you in this other environment. And that's kind of what I experience when I go in the woods. It's just this magical, untouched place where I can see God's beauty, and I can just, it's quiet, you know, we're so inundated with everything that you don't get a chance to just breathe and de-stress. And I got really into adventure books, like Endurance, which is about Shackleton's voyage, the Franklin voyages, a lot of Northwest Passage books. So kind of in that era, I can't even remember what century, probably the late 17th, 18th century, where you had a lot of ship voyages coming out of Britain and trying to find the Northwest Passage. And that kind of gave me a love for the cold, and kind of, you'd see these men go on these expeditions, and a lot of good books out there. Resolute, that's another really inspiring book. That's about the search for Benjamin Franklin and the Lost Party. And actually ties into the presidential desk, the Resolute desk, and how that came about from one of the ships. So all of that just kind of geared in me this mind of adventure, and just like, I need to get outside and I need to be testing myself and doing these things. Kind of a romanticized view, like, oh, I think everybody goes, oh, I wish I lived in this time or in this time. And in reality, you would have hated it and wished you didn't.
Yeah.
But I have this idea of explorer, pioneer mindset. Another good book, Stephen Ambrose, Undaunted Courage, about Lewis and Clark, that especially for this area, because, you know, they came right through. So that pretty well stuck with me. But as I got older, probably what struck a chord for all the survival stuff was the man Les Stroud. So Survivor Man.
Les Stroud. Love Survivor Man. The first man to ever video himself without any outside help, you know, and he was the real deal.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I hated it when he quit doing his stuff, because he was legit.
That's really what got a bug under me, to be like, you know, I want to be like that. And I want to, like, I didn't even have a clue with filming. I wasn't even into any of that kind of stuff, but, you know, just, okay, what does he have? He has a Leatherman. I'm going to try to get that, or do this, you know, and try to build a shelter. And I kind of toyed with some of that, but I just really soaked up, read everything he had, watched everything he had. And I think for my adultish life, that's probably, you know, about, I guess that was probably 20-ish years ago, really set me on a path of just like, okay, I'm going to learn this and be prepared. And just kind of his mindset of preparation and emergencies and all that kind of stuff. So all those factors kind of combined to just kind of slowly feed me. You know, it wasn't like one major event. It was just whatever I was interested in, and just kind of from all angles, just kind of poking me and get me interested here and there.
When did you realize that you had some skills and abilities that you could help others with, and maybe start a YouTube channel and share? And what sparked that?
I haven't. No. I'm still shocked that when anybody says anything is helpful. It really is it's a very humbling in many ways. For one, it's shocking if somebody says, hey, you know, I really appreciate this and I was able to learn this. Or I get a lot of comments of people that I'm not able to go out anymore, or I'm, you know, my spouse is fighting cancer or whatever, and this allows me to escape. And I'm like, it's pretty humbling, but it's also like, I don't know anything. Like, I just go out and I'm just a guy from Idaho that goes and hangs out in the woods. I mean, that's literally it. So, but to answer your question, it was, so I started doing in between when I stopped being a park ranger and kind of moved back home, started a different job. I didn't have that outlet as much. I wasn't living in the woods. I wasn't constantly surrounded by this. So my job was pretty stressful, the current one, and I needed an outlet, and I just needed quiet time. So I tell my wife, I was like, I just need to go this weekend and be away from everybody. And she's always been 100% supportive and just like, yeah, go. I want you to relax. I know you love the woods. You come back refreshed. So, but it was kind of weird because I wanted to do it as a challenge. So that's where the misery trip came into play, because I thought, like, generally, you know, we idealize camping and going out, but a lot of times, a lot of the stories revolve around, like, I was pretty miserable out there. You know, it's either you're getting rained on or you're uncomfortable, but there's something about that. When you get back, you have that story and you have that memory, and you're just like, I can't wait to do that again. But you get out there and you're griping about whatever this or that doesn't work out. But so the survival aspect, I thought, I'm just going to go out there, take as little stuff as I can and just set up a challenge. And I know I'm going to be miserable, and so I just kind of jokingly called them misery trips. But so I just do that like a couple times a year, not filming, not doing anything. Had no interest in social media or any of that. It was just go out, set up a little shelter. Sometimes I'd come back in the middle of the night. I remember coming back at midnight in the snow one time because ended up burning down the majority of the shelter, and it just everything went wrong. From the middle of wearing the wrong kind of boots, I wore a pair of, they're called muck boots. They're just basically wellies, essentially insulated wellies. And I hiked up there with no snowshoes, and I was post holing. I was up to my thighs. Had to take one trip up with my pack out to post hole way up, and I just same thing. I picked a steep section, just decided to go up it. Had my dog with me. He's barely. I used to have a Malamute at that time. He's just kind of walking on top of the snow. Come back down and get my pack. Anyways, I get everything set up, and I thought, oh yeah, this is all bushcrafty, and I'm going to do the survival thing. And so, because I did the same thing, I'd watch YouTube guys and learn and see stuff and be like, yeah, I want to do that. And anyways, I set up, made the fire way too big. Didn't bring extra pair of boots. Those wellies held all my sweat and just moisture in there. So I had taken them off. I was drying off my socks on top of the posts. Those caught on fire. I was standing there literally in underwear because I sweat so much that I just stripped down, and I was just standing on big ponderosa pine bark in front of fire, and I was still just like, I am amazing. This is great. And then quickly humbled as soon as everything torched up. There goes my socks. And then I look at my dog who's laying in the bed just looking at me, and I thought, well, it's time to go home. But a lot of those learning times where you just, it is what it is. You do stupid stuff and you learn about it and you're miserable. And but all that kind of escalated to the channel. And that was kind of random because I didn't get a smartphone until I was forced to get a smartphone. I had a flip phone. Finally, the company said, it was Verizon. They said, we're shutting down your phone. Like we no longer support that with the phone. And I didn't want anything to do with smartphones because I knew I'd see people like this. And I kind of have an addictive personality once I get into something. And I thought, as soon as I have that, I'm going to learn all these things that it can do. And sure enough, I guess it was December of 22 is when I was forced to get a smartphone. And then I was sitting there messing around with it and took a little joke video and sent it over to my wife. And I was like, that was incredibly easy. You can film things. You know, I was just like like out of the Stone Age. I didn't know you could even like FaceTime, all this stuff I thought was sorcery. I didn't know what was going on. It was talking, and then somebody was like, you should film your trips. And I thought, nah. And then I just decided, my wife was like, yeah, you really should. So I had an old Pentax camera that I took out, and I took my old smartphone. And the only reason I got that smartphone was a buddy had it cracked, and he goes, here, you can just have this. So I just had an old cracked phone. And so that's when I made the first video and started the YouTube channel. And that was February of 23. So I'm just coming up on 2 years. And then started getting into all the Facebook and Instagram, and people were shocked because they're like, where did you come from? Like, I even had friends who hadn't seen me since high school. And they're like, we couldn't find a footprint at all. We couldn't even find how to contact you. And I was like, yeah, that's how I wanted it. That sounds really mean.
I understand.
Yeah. So that's kind of, oddly enough, it was having to get a smartphone is what sparked doing the YouTube channel. And it's been a roller coaster ride since then.
I love looking through your Instagram and watching your videos and stuff. Your shelters are very interesting to me. You've got one that you use a lot, but you also go out and build like some emergency shelters. What's your theory? What's your what would you say your process for thinking about how to build a shelter? If I was needing to build an emergency shelter, what's your theory on those? How do you go about doing those?
It's weird because there's kind of like playtime forts shelters. Yeah. And that's what I have fun doing. Like, as a kid, you just like piling up all the cushions and making a fort in the house in the living room. And that's kind of what bushcraft is to me. It's going out and just playing, and you're just, I want to make this kind of shelter, that kind of shelter. And so you have those ones that are kind of the fun ones, and then you have the efficient ones. And really, like when I go out, sometimes I have a kind of an idea of what I'm going to do, but half the time the terrain is totally different than what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
You start to look at something like there's no way that's going to work. So you work with what's out there. You work with what trees and what rocks, and you go out with an idea of I'm going to build an A-frame, or I'm going to build a lean-to or a Quincy hut or a debris shelter. You're all of a sudden you're going to get locked into your head to where I need this specific item, or else I can't do it. And I feel like that creates a block, almost like with sports or really anything in life. If you be like, there's one way to do this, and as soon as something comes in which derails you, your mind shuts down and goes, I can't do this because I told myself I need X, Y, Z.
Right.
So whereas if you have a variety of options, kind of like visualizing beforehand, that's what I did with park ranger and scenes and even emergency stuff, is I was always visualizing so I could prepare my body, whether it was something physically difficult or emotionally difficult with, somebody dying or whatever it might be. It's funny because I kind of do the same with shelter building. Is I think like, this is what I want to accomplish. I need to stay warm. I need to be able to have a fire. So I know I'm not answering that directly, but really just something that's going to block the wind and keep you dry. That's all it comes down to. I mean, I just got back this weekend. I thought, why don't I just try doing a tree well? Everybody says avoids tree wells because you can get stuck in the snow. And I mean, it's a natural shelter. It's the same thing as like some of the videos you're talking about when I build a debris shelter, or not a debris, but a primitive shelter, pine boughs. I mean, that's all it is you're going to a tree and you already have a perfectly good shelter, and you can add to it as needed if you didn't have a tarp, etc. And it worked fine. Like I built a fire out front and it was snowing, and I had a little bit of duff come in on me, but I stayed very warm. It was down in the 20s, and I just slept on top of my sled, with a sleeping bag. And but really, it just comes down to keeping yourself dry and out of the wind, because that's what will kill you, is that ambient moisture coming through. And so if you have some kind of mat, whether it's a sleeping pad, or just doing like what I often do, and like what you mentioned, is building up pine boughs, or laying down bark and then pine boughs on top of it. You just got to get that insulation up off the ground. And then even if you have a raincoat and you have to hunker down in the fetal position, you're going to be fine. Like other than, I mean, if you're in a freezing temps, you need to get some fire skills and learn how to build that. And like you had Blackbeard fire on here, and I use that stuff all the time. I tested it in wet, cold, freezing cold, heat, like every way possible, and it doesn't fail. And that's what I want to see, because it's so easy. Why would you not have this tool with you that can save your life? And I mean, a lot of times I make long fires, and I just use a couple of those fire starters, get the whole thing going. That's.
I wanted to ask you on Blackbeard, what's your favorite of their styles, the rope or the little plugs?
The plugs. I do more with the plugs. I ended up using I ended up using the rope this go around just because I hadn't used it in so long. I thought I better use it, but those fire plugs are just, I mean, I've had some videos I've done for them, just getting them, I dipped it in the water, got it soaking wet. It's been freezing out, and they're so small. And that bag, I mean, it sounds like I'm doing a sales pitch, but I'm not. It's just I love gear that works, because we've all been there when you get something off Amazon, or you see some stupid YouTube video, which I fall in prey to, of like somebody's like, this is going to work amazing. I'm like, I'm going to get that. And you get it, and you're like, this sucks. This is a piece of crap. And then you get mad. And I mean, their stuff works. It's so small, you keep it with you,
and it doesn't weigh anything. It's so light. It's so light. That's amazing. I love it.
Very impressive what they've done. Those guys are awesome as a company. I mean, they're good guys, and they want to do what's right. They stand behind it. So definitely appreciate those guys. But
I have both, but I always sort of default to the plug, every time. It's just so easy. You just do the whole
just do that, and it works.
Got your reverse fire built, you just do that.
Works every time.
Slide it and you set it down and you walk away. It's great.
It's good stuff.
I love it.
So hopefully that answers you.
Oh yeah, well it makes sense to me. With you explaining that, and we one of our favorite TV shows is The Alone Show on the History Channel, and they take all these people who are Bushcraft outdoors experts is what they call them. You know, I say they're experts. They go up there and some of them last a day and then they come home. But a lot of them last a long time. But it's really interesting to watch because they drop them in all these, you know, in the last season, they actually showed how they put them in the different places. They actually draw a number and that's the place that they go to. And all the places that they go to are different. But it's odd to us when we watch it about all of their shelters are completely different. You know, some of them build teepees and some of them build very elaborate shelters and some of them are very, very minimal. You can't even hardly sit up in them, much less stand up in them. And I've always wondered, why are they all different? If all these are outdoor experts, why are they all different? And your explanation is you got to take what it gives you, and you can't be a single mindset. It has to be done this way. So that makes total sense to me, the way you explained it. So I really appreciate that. That makes total sense.
I think those people that are successful, like even season 1, I can't remember the guy's name, but you know, he just used a rock ledge and just kind of leaned some stuff up against it. It was just enough for him to squeeze into. And then you got guys like Timber, Clayhorn, who, you know, like even in his book, you know, he talks about like that battle. He was like, gosh, I just don't have the resources. I just don't have. And then finally he's like, I'm going to use what nature provides. So yeah, you're right though. I haven't thought too deeply about what causes that distinction. And I think it is that whatever class you come out of, if you're a hardcore bushcraft guy, a hardcore survival guy, and you have like these pillars of, I am this, you know, I got to be that guy. I got to make this elaborate, whatever. And versus just having fun with it. Of course, on alone, you can't really have fun because you'll die, but
yeah.
Well, we actually got the distinct privilege of interviewing Timber on the podcast, and he's such a amazing guy. Such a cool guy, neat guy, and I have such admiration for him. But he actually built one of the most elaborate shelters I've ever seen that's on there, and had his big moose horns right on the front of it. You know, it was a freaking hotel compared to what some of them had. But and he took a while to move into it. He used it as a smoker for his meat before he even moved into it and lived in it. And it's just amazing, you know, how they done some stuff like that. But on your Instagram, you talk about you're into outdoor adventures, gear, survival, and Falcor. So tell us about Falcor, and how your man's best friend came into your life and taking your pup out on your trips.
Oh man, yeah, Falcor's been a huge blast. I mean, I had my old dog Kodiak, was a Malamute, and we had him 11 years. He traveled around with us to the parks, all that kind of stuff, and he passed, and that was way harder than I thought. Like, it's just funny. I mean, it was hard. I mean, it was hard, and we thought, because it's just me and my wife, and we thought, never again. We're never going through that again. I'm not getting a dog, anything. And then started doing the channel and started, you know, I'm used to being alone. I've spent a lot of time, just even, you know, from youth. I just enjoy it. Like, I don't mind being alone. Like, some people are like, I can't handle it. But there was also that sense of, I usually had my dog with me. I had some kind of companion with me. And I don't know, I think we made the mistake of looking at puppies and then researching dogs. And we were thinking, well, we don't want the same size dog, because, I mean, our Malamute was huge and he was a fur ball and just hair all over. And so we're like, okay, well, we don't want a little dog. We don't want a gigantic dog. I mean, I still like gigantic dogs, but even on trips, it was just like he would take up the entire back end of the vehicle.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, let's get something more compact. So we started looking at Aussies, and not fully realizing how high energy they were and how much they shed. But we made the mistake, looked at a breeder, and it was over probably a couple hours outside of Boise, and thought, well, we'll just go look. You know, go look. And sure enough, you know, we see him and we're like, oh, yeah, we'll take him. And took our hearts. So we've had him. He is just coming up, I think, on a year and a half. And he's just a little cuddle bug fur ball. I mean, so much personality, and just brings us a lot of joy. And like you mentioned, a lot of on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, people are like, let's see more Falcor and let's see your stupid face. So he definitely gets the limelight. And but he has so much fun out there, especially in snow. He just goes nonstop. And he's kind of a pest though, because he'll get the zoomies and go run around, and knock over cameras. I have one outing where I had a hot tent set up and I had my guy line set out for the chimney, and he's wigging out and just racing around, and I'm yelling at him, just getting him amped up. And he goes along and clips that guy line in the chimney, just taco, just whack. And you can hear me on the video. I just go, well, that's one's done. And just, he was having fun, so I had to make sure he wasn't hurt. And but same thing when I'm cutting wood. I always like bringing out my big double bit axe and just chopping wood. It's just part of the experience. And he'll sit there every time, and I have to keep him back to keep him safe. And I'll be chopping. He'll come in and try to get a piece. So I constantly, while I'm cutting wood, I have to take one, throw it. So the video, a lot of it's edited out, but it's me chopping, throwing, and I'm trying to get my pile. And you look out, and there's just sticks laying everywhere. And so then I have to go clean that up. And but yeah, he is definitely a good time and awesome snow dog. He doesn't get cold, doesn't, of course I have to make sure and watch him and take care of him. And I get a lot of comments where people are like, "Oh, you're abusing your dog," and I'm like, "Yeah, he looks pretty abused. I mean, he's got his own bed. He's got a brand new toy on every trip, his food, and he's sitting in a tent that's 60, 70 degrees."
Yeah, he looks like he's struggling in the videos that I saw for sure.
Well, we've talked about this. We've actually done shows about overlanding with pets or traveling with pets, and with the way that you do your bushcrafting out in the middle and pulling the sleds and stuff. That was one of my questions. Was now that you've got your dog, does that make your experience easier or challenging?
It's both. That's an easy answer. It's easier in the sense of what I meant is just the added joy of seeing him out there and just the funny stuff that I see, and he just makes me laugh. You get up in the morning, and of course he doesn't want to be on his bed, and he jumps up on my bed and lolling around and doing funny things. Like that makes anything worth it. But it is a little bit of a challenge because I have to keep an eye on him. I have to make sure, and he does good. He just kind of wanders around, but he's still a puppy. So, and if it's hunting season, I have to really be careful. I got in this big bright orange vest now, or pack, because people can be dumb, and just shoot at anything. It is kind of difficult. And he is really a big pest on the cameras. Like he just likes to clip them and hit them. And every time I'm setting up, you'll see, like whenever I'm doing my bedding along with the wood, I'll be setting up something. And as soon as you go to his level, it's just, he has to be right in your face, and he's crawling all over and in and out. And it's funny, but just making sure, I am his protector, so I have to make sure he's okay. And then if there's critters around and predators, it's kind of an added, mostly if it was coyotes or wolves, they would be a little more interested in him. I don't think he would deter to a degree. Definitely the coyotes, if he barks, they get scared off, but that smell gets curious to coyotes and wolves, and it can kind of draw them in, versus the other. So I just have to have things with me that I can deter them with.
I totally get that. I remember it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was sitting right beside my FJ having coffee in the morning, and my little English bulldog was sitting right beside me, and I just happened to look up, and about 30 yards away was a wolf looking right at us. And that was one of those times that made my hair stand up on the back of my neck, and it makes you think. Brings me to my next question. Have you had any survival situations out on any of your trips that you can remember? Things that may have turned your stomach or made you think, what have I got myself into?
Sometimes it's with the cold. Like I said, I've sometimes had to turn around, and I always have that break point of, I will go to this point, kind of like mountaineers do. If they don't hit a certain elevation by a certain time, that's the ripcord. They draw back. And I have to do that in the time, because a lot of times I'm doing this after work. I'm racing up to the mountains, trying to get everything. And here it gets, especially for winter, it gets dark at 5 to 5:30. And so I have a limited amount of time that I know I need to get to shelter. I need to cut wood, make fire. That's essentially all there really is. And then the rest is just kind of screwing around, eating dinner and all that. But like I mentioned before, I'm a sweaty Yeti is what I say. Like, it doesn't matter if it's summer or winter. As soon as I do activity, it's my Scotch blood, I guess, and being hairy. I just sweat. I mean, it doesn't take much. Like I had a buddy, he has a picture of me somewhere. We're in the snow and I have my backpack on and a shirt off, and we're hiking in to do a camp. We were actually doing kind of a survival camp, and it wasn't to be macho or any of that kind of stuff. It's to literally keep my clothes dry. So I run into that every so often where I hit that break point where I'm so saturated with sweat from cutting wood that if I don't get this fire started and the temperatures are getting, in the single digits or getting down to zero, like it's been a while since I've been in sub-zeros, but usually around that 0 to 5 degree mark, I'll go out a lot in, and that's dangerous, because if my vehicle doesn't start, my heater doesn't work.
Yeah.
I did have one where it got down to negative 12, and I started out, my heater had gone out in my truck, and I thought, even if I slip through and go into the creek, because there's a lot of spots where I go where it's just kind of hidden, I don't have a way to quickly warm up. And I've got myself wet, very cold in the winter, and gone in rivers, and I know what it's like to lose that finger mobility. And you can't do it. You can't even unzip it. We did a camp out with some buddies. It got down to negative 24 or negative 27 Fahrenheit. And we were by a hot springs, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But I mean, I remember us just trying to change into our clothes and get the fire started. And from taking stuff off to put on our dry stuff, I mean, literally just trying to get the bag open. It was like having sausages just for fingers. So there's definitely that aspect. And then a recent one, I went into a kind of desert canyon this summer, kind of fall area. And that was one with Falcor. It was the first time I went with him where I had an open shelter. I have a little canvas, kind of a wheeling style is the name of it, tent that I set up. And usually I have him in clothes, he's in a full tent, so he's not going to go anywhere at night. Well, because people ask about cougars, and this was kind of a survival-ish situation where we're bedding down and, shut our eyes. I shut my eyes trying to go to sleep and wake up to the most horrendous scream you could hear, and there's no one around. Like, I'm in this canyon, and I've always heard, my mom used to hang out with these cougar hunters. Idaho here, he was one of the top, cougar hunters, but she would go out in the summers with him, and she would talk about hearing those screams. And she said, it sounds like a woman screaming. It just cuts you to the bone. And other predators don't really concern me. Bears, they'll leave you alone in winter. They're not around anyways. Wolves around here are pretty skittish because as soon as they see you, they'll just take off. But cougars, I mean, they're the real deal around here. So I heard that. Yeah, and you don't know. Like, there could have been one just perched up on the rocks where I was, and where I was sitting, I had a rock, kind of a big rock in front of me and a big rock behind me, and then it was just thick trees and bush, and my light wouldn't penetrate that far. And a couple owls came flying out at that same time, and then I just heard this kind of like, it was almost like a chirping noise, and I thought, I don't know what that is. Is that a bird? What is that? And when I got home anyways, I looked up, an audio of a cougar popped up in my feed randomly, and oh my gosh, it was the exact same thing I heard, that little chirping, like almost like a meow bark, like cats do, just kind of, except a lot more intense. So the rest of that night, Falcor's growling, barking. I have to stay awake just holding on to him because I was like, I'm not letting, he might want to run off after him. And that was one of those situations where I had, I do carry a firearm usually, and I have that over here, and I'm just like, all right, I got to get, I got to be prepared for whatever comes. But that is the most on edge I've been. And at the same time, you're exhausted. And so you're just kind of dozing, but holding on the dog, and then he'd growl and bark. And, but that was one of those ones where it was like, this could go south. Like, people do get attacked, and it's not going to try to pack out in the middle of the night. It's just, okay, I got this rock behind me. I got a corridor here, a view, and here. So my only attack points are, these 2 points. But that's probably the most recent one where I was like, this could go south quick. So
do you take anything
generally?
Do you take anything for protection?
I do. Yeah. I carry a firearm almost all the time with me. I have a pistol on me, and I just don't show it. People, I mean, even on this, maybe they'll freak out or have a bunch of questions, but I mean, people freak out about everything and send me hate mail and all this kind of stuff.
All the time.
I try not to show. I'm sure you guys know, but I tried to keep that out of the camera. But I always have something for me and him, and that's also based on previous experiences and knowing what can happen. And you gotta have something. And like, even pepper spray. I'm not gonna use pepper spray. I'll just the wind will shift and it'll come back on me. I think that's
Exactly. That is the
But,
worst
yeah.
stuff ever created. I don't know why anybody uses that. I've been sprayed with it twice in my life, and it's the most awful stuff
Ew.
ever.
same
And
here.
I will have to be on my deathbed about to take my last breath before I use it. I will be out of bullets. I'll be out of taser. I'll be out of everything before I use that stuff. It's awful. But I
Yeah,
can't.
people would ask me the same thing. It was like tasing is horrible, but it's only 5 seconds. But man, getting
5
for
seconds.
those listening, I haven't been arrested. It was for previous law enforcement. So before you think, geez, what did you do? That chokehold on me, and but that's what it is. When I see people, they'll take pepper spray out and they haven't ever used it. They don't know what they're doing. They're like, that's okay. If a bear comes, I got pepper spray. I'm like, have you ever been downwind of pepper spray? Because, or if it just, or say the bear brushes by you or anything, like then you are in a survival situation where you can't see. You might have respiratory issues. So preparation, people just don't prepare.
Well,
That's one thing.
if you don't hit it in the face, you're just gonna make it mad. I'm just telling
but
you right now.
and
You got to be
a
a
lot
good
of
shot.
but a lot of times, wouldn't it be true to say that if you see a bear and it's close enough for pepper spray, isn't he going to tend to be upwind from you? I mean, because if he's downwind from you, he's probably going to avoid your scent.
Yeah. That's
Most would be, right? So you're spraying into the wind.
Most of it sprays
know.
about 20 feet, but that's without the wind. So you got to
Yeah.
factor that in before you push that trigger. So just think
Yeah.
about it. Just think about it. What is the one tool that you never leave home without? One piece of gear you never leave home
That's
without.
funny. I mean, it's one of those like multiples, so it's hard. But I mean, I always have fire starter and a blade. You know, whether it's an axe, a saw, or you know, a belt knife, or even a folder knife, because I always have a folding knife on me during the day. But those are, I always have it. It probably is some kind of fire making ability, just because I think you can get by fine. You can work your way out of a situation. You can hike. You can survive. You can make it without water. You can make it without food. But if you get cold, and I've been very, very cold before, and I know what happens to your body, that to me, that's the most important thing. And I mean, even, you know, say you get lost out in the woods and you don't have a knife, you don't have anything, you don't need all that stuff to make a fire. Like, I know everybody, like, I'll go through and I'll show my different saws. I did a survival thing where I just had a tack bag, chest rig, and I had a little tiny saw and some fire starters. I did have a big knife, but it was kind of just more for show to see what I could do. But even on that, I used it was literally just a pocket saw. So just a chainsaw blade with straps on it, cut my logs. But I mean, you can just go you can break off sticks off of the lower parts of trees. You can find duff and sticks anywhere. I mean, most areas you can find a fire resource and you can get that fire going. And it does two things. It actually does three things. It obviously warns you and can save you, but signaling is also the big priority. So if you're in a survival situation, you do what you got to. If you need to catch a tree on fire, and I know people are like, oh, you're going to start a forest fire. Obviously, I don't know, that's thinking out long term, but if it's probably not going to happen that way. You know, you're probably not going to start a forest fire, and you're not going to catch a tree on fire because it's incredibly hard. But some way to signal whether it's night or day, because even on search and rescue stuff, when you're going, or when we would have our missions looking for somebody, you don't have very much information in any little bit, even if it's tying ribbon on a tree to mark the direction you went to, all that kind of stuff. But so if somebody has a fire, you're like, you can smell it, you may not see it, and it allows everybody to use all their senses to help somebody out. And if you're alone for a while, like we mentioned before, there's something calming about a fire. You know, I really think it de-stresses you and brings you down. Lets you think about the situation and where you're at, and just, okay, I accomplished this. I made fire. Kind of like on what was the movie with Tom Hanks where he goes, I've made fire.
Castaway.
Yeah. You know, I think it is that thing. You're like, I did this. I can make it now. So when people learn those tools, those abilities, it just steps them up here because it gives you that confidence. So yeah, I'd say some fire making ability to answer that in about 3,000 words.
Oh, I love it. Do you like the older traditional bushcrafting tools, or do you like the modern stuff better?
You know, I kind of goes back to my hybrid kind of liking camping, liking new tech gear, all that kind of stuff. But I do have a love for the old. I mean, I'm finding more and more that almost everything I wear when I go out is wool. That's also because of now I've got enough testing, like extreme testing, to go, yeah, synthetic's going to not kill me, but synthetic's going to make things miserable. Wool is legit. I just, like I said, this weekend I went out. I mean, it was only 22 degrees Fahrenheit, completely soaked, wearing this wool top with kind of this mesh liner in it, but all wool. And I remember looking before, I hadn't changed before bed. I was warm in front of the fire, and not dry because of the fire, but it just had, it kept me warm. It kept me warm, and it worked. So with the traditional stuff, I do just have a love for like kind of the bushcrafting fathers, like I mentioned, Morris Kachansky, and there's a author, Nesmuk, and he was around, I think, 1820s, 1890s. He went by the name, that was his pen name, but he wrote a book called, I believe it was called Bushcraft as well. But they were kind of these romantic writers during that time in the late 18th century, or excuse me, late 1800s, early 1900s. Horst Kephart, that's another author, Daniel Beard. They all kind of took the traditional. It was kind of a time when people were just getting into camping because vehicles started coming around as time went on, and they had this ability to get out, a little bit more free time in the Americas, and that's when people would have these huge bins of camping gear, and they'd be bringing pots, and they'd get porters and hire people to take them out into the woods, kind of like big city folks coming out. And anyways, they would write about those experiences, and then just how you need to. It's funny because back then they were talking about how you need to get back to your roots, and the less you carry, the more you know, and even what color wool to wear, and carry a knife and all this kind of stuff. But definitely that traditional style is just kind of fits back to that romantic period I was talking about. I just kind of have an enjoyment of things were simple. You have this, you make it work, and if you don't know how, like you bring a stitch kit, and I think that qualifies in real bushcraft where you're using minimal tools to make what you need. Pretty much like on Alone, like those guys, all those guys are legit.
You can take 10 things.
Part, like,
that's it.
They know their stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
10 things. That's it. I love seeing how people get to where they're going, and I love seeing the pack outs. When you pack your stuff out, what does it normally look like? What do you normally take?
So primary is first aid. I always have a first aid kit that's kind of loaded out, and part of that's, it's like I was saying, I end up having a lot of stuff, but I don't feel comfortable with going minimal. There's times, like I said, where I had that chest pack. I had my med kit in the car. I wasn't too far away, so I knew I could get to it. But so yeah, I have something with a tourniquet. I have some heavy cloth bandages and stuff that I'm familiar with how to use. Not only for myself, but if I come across somebody or if I'm with my wife. Same thing for in the car when we take trips. Got to have a first aid kit. And so if folks listening or whatever, I know it's not sexy, it's not exciting, it's not like the new tech, but like My Medic, that's where I buy my stuff. They have pre-made kits. If I can stress anything from working on people who went out for day drives or went to a park and then they have a family member die or something, extreme things happen. So I'm not trying to be the dark cloud, but you bringing that up, I just think it's vital. Like if you have a family, if not, it's just yourself, but if you have a family, you're responsible for them. So don't expect somebody to come along while somebody's dies because of something that can be prevented because of blood loss. So it's very real. It happens. Know your terrain. So sorry, I get kind of preachy on that, but so yeah, I have a first aid kit. I've got a fire kit. I usually have a very small pack of extra clothes that I can change into because I know I'm going to sweat. So I always have, specifically right now for the season for winter, I keep a set of long johns, socks and underwear, and a beanie and gloves. And I can kind of keep it about compressed down to that size. So it doesn't take up any room. And it's probably, 2 pounds, something like that. So keep that. I try to have something to insulate me from the ground and or an emergency cover, whether it's a poncho or even just one of those Walmart cheapo ponchos with me. I usually have a compass, a blade, usually some kind of saw, and then a lot of my stuff is camera gear. I mean, batteries, all this stuff that I used to not have to carry, but has become a vital part of my what I've got. But those are the main things. Yeah, some kind of blade, fire starter, first aid, extra clothes, and usually a kind of a signaling device. if I needed it, whether that be a mirror or on my compass using the mirror. And then little things like ribbon, like I was saying, if I need to mark something out, I'll try to keep that kind of stuff handy. But it's small but big. Like you said, I have a bunch of extras of all that stuff to back up, and that's kind of the problem. Is I end up with this pack that's very heavy because of other items. Food, I'm not, and I know this is going to offend you because of I can't remember which podcast I was listening to. I think it was with the Gossamer Gear owner where you're talking about being a foodie, and I don't know if you are, Tony, but I'm just not a food guy. Like I can go without eating. I don't really have a desire to. I used to, cheese was my main, like, if I could have cheese, and then my body switched around and said, you can't have cheese anymore. So now I'm like, well, why even bother eating? But generally I'll bring a steak, and I like to cook single steak over the fire on a stick and water. But yeah, pretty basic stuff. But I just try to cover those priorities. Like I can take care of myself and others. I can make fire and I can cut stuff.
How big is your?
I almost always have my.
How big is your pack? What liter is your pack?
My one I've been using from Van Quest Gear, I was testing out this last year. It is a 35. Yeah, a 35, and it's kind of geared up so you can carry camera equipment around on that. And then my other one is a military medium Alice, and I don't know what that is. It's probably, you could probably stuff that to 50, because you can add on packs like the military
right.
Molly webbing packs on the side. So I'd like to have, something bigger, like a 60 liter. And just, I think that's where we get into the old versus, new gear. I started out just getting a lot of military equipment when I did all this because I'm cheap and I couldn't justify spending the money on
surplus stores, man. You can get anything at a military surplus store. It's great.
And I'm hard on equipment. Like I'm dragging wood, I'm doing stuff. And so I would finally saved up and got this, it was a Mountain Hardwear coat. I thought it was kind of a puffy style. I'm going to get a nice new coat. And I got that. And I was out at a shooting range with my dad, and I barely snagged the sleeve on a little piece of metal where you keep the targets, and just immediately went. And I remember thinking, like, that's it. I'm just sticking with military surplus or wool or stuff that doesn't tear. But packs, I would like to get something a little bit bigger where I can compartmentalize and really load out if I need to, just be able, I could put like 3 days worth on, because there's nothing worse than digging through like the military pack. You just, those side pouches, one big pocket, digging in the middle of the night, and you get frustrated. And
Well, I love, my wife says I have an infatuation for backpacks, and I do. And so I was just wondering about that because I carry, when we go backpacking, mine's a 40 liter, but when I pack it out with food and water and everything, it weighs about 18 pounds. And that's what, I was wondering about the size of your pack, and the weight of everything is so much more in the bushcrafting world because you're taking a wood stove, you're taking a whole bunch of stuff that I don't take. And so that's what interests me when you talk about your pack out. So that's pretty cool to me. Are there any misconceptions about bushcrafting that you've learned throughout what people think it is that it's really not?
It's funny because you get in these communities and groups like on Facebook or different stuff. People they get mad. You start talking about bushcraft, and if you do one thing that is not technically bushcraft, you're banished. It's funny because it's a term that's just thrown on everything. People are like, "Oh, bushcrafter," and it's changed from what it originally was. They even, I think in one of those books I was talking about, they could have called it woodcraft back in the day, and it was just the ability to craft what you need when you're in the woods out of what's around. And I think, in its truest sense, that's what it is. It's just very minimal. Take what you need, but like you said, heavy tools, whatever you might take, an awl, you might take, a big double bit axe. But it's such a changed term. It's just evolved really to where, like I said, you kind of have camping, bushcraft, survival, preparedness, and all of those, you get some people that intermingle. But at its truest form, I think bushcraft is making stuff in the woods and trying to survive with what you can, like, build a shelter, build a little spatula, or make a spoon, carve a spoon, and just build basically alone, like you mentioned. Like I think alone is
Mhm.
probably a really good representation of what actual bushcrafting is. If you lose your fire making abilities, can you use different ability, flint and steel, etc. Um, to do all that. And that's even stuff like I've never even pursued too much because I'm comfortable with how I make fire, and I still need to learn, more bushcrafty stuff. But yeah, it is almost a fighting term for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, we go through the same thing with overlanding. People say you're not overlanding unless you have this or that, or when I first started getting into the lifestyle 7, 8, 9 years ago, they were like, you can't overland in a Subaru, and now I have a Subaru, so tell me I can't overland in a Subaru. But it's just one of those things where people have their opinions about everything, and that's fine. People we live in the most opinionated society that I've ever seen throughout my lifetime. I don't know how it could get any worse. So anyway, we just have to deal with it. But that's just the way life is, and we just move on. So, we're getting kind of to the end of our when we want to kind of shut this down on our time limit. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to speak on something. On your Instagram. You have a Bible verse, Hebrews 13:6. And I looked that up because I didn't know it by heart. And it's one version says, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do to me. What does this verse mean to you? Why did you decide on that one?
So, gosh, that's stood out to me since probably high school. So, grew up in a Christian family, and so I was raised under that. But it was more, if you're raised in, at some point you have to make it your own. I mean, you get into high school, you start getting older, and you go, is this just because my parents taught me this? Do I really believe in God? Do I believe in Jesus? Do I believe in salvation? And you start becoming a man or a woman, and you have to decide for yourself, like, do I actually have a relate? Do I care? For one, do I believe any of this? And I was fortunate to have, I went to a Christian school, and so I had some really good influences. And, I spent my time just praying and thinking and being like, okay, God, do you, because, as a little kid, when I was told about Jesus, I was like, he sounds awesome. Yeah, I like him. He did this for me. Like, why not? Like, to have somebody love me, that's cool. You know, you get in stuff into high school or whatever age. And I was very convicted that, yes, this is the way, this is truth. And I had a Bible teacher that said, because especially being in a religious school or a Christian school, you get a lot of people that are just religious. I mean, to say how it is in society, you get a lot of people who say they're Christian or they're whatever, and they have it as a religious thing they have to do. And people would call me religious, and as I got older, they're like, hey, at jobs, like, hey, Edgar, you're religious. What do you think on this? I was like, don't call me religious. Like, I'm not, like, I'm a follower of Christ, but I mean, you can be religious about football. You can be religious about anything. It's just you follow it. But I would say this is how I live my life, and this is what I believe, and this is what I believe truth is. But back to what I was saying, a Bible teacher would say, it doesn't matter how much you read your Bible, it doesn't matter how much you pray. It's about a relationship between you and Christ. And obviously those things do matter and they're important. But his point was, you can do all that works-based stuff, but if you haven't had that one-on-one with Christ and been like, okay, like, do I believe in you? Do I believe what you did? Do I believe that you died for my sins and rose the third day, to allow me to have salvation, and to accommodate for my sins before God? Then I looked at that and I said, yeah, that is it. Like, I can have that relationship, and it just, to have that, to know that there was somebody who cared about me, and my parents did, everybody, but it's just different when you have that, I guess there's not a better term, but that salvation moment, to know that he is my creator and my savior, and that I can have an intimate relationship with him. And that's what I do when I go out in the woods, is it gives me a chance to think, to pray, to get all this garbage and crap out of my head, to where I can go, okay, God, what am I doing? What am I doing for you? And it's usually, I'm not doing much, But back to the point of the verse, is that just stood out to me since high school, is that we live so much, and I'm still guilty of it. Like, we're so led by people, and those around us, and we make our decisions and we're influenced. And from the time you're a child through high school, college, or whatever you decide to do in work, I don't care who you are. You can think you're as tough as you can be, and you care what people think, and you're kind of watching what they do. And just to have that assurance of like, the Lord is my helper. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I mean, he's by my side, all through the Old Testament, New Testament, saying he's by his saints, and he's there for me. Like, what do I have to fear? What can man do to me? And, I pray I'm never in a situation where it's a martyr situation, or you like Fox's Book of Martyrs, where you had guys torn limb to limb, and sawed in half and eaten by lions. And it's like very real stuff that we have no idea about, but society's becoming okay with violence to a degree I've never seen. Me and my wife were talking today how stuff you can see just on Instagram or Facebook or whatever that pops up, and you're like, I didn't want to see that. Like, what the heck? And it just, we're such a numb society that, just to know that my Savior's by my side. I guess that's the easiest way to say it, like that he is my captain, and I picture him just as almost like as a warrior, and I can be my king, and I can come alongside and just be, if I can just be a faithful soldier, which I'm not very good at. I'm a pretty crappy soldier. But to know that he loves me regardless, and I don't have to fear whatever's coming at me, whatever enemies I see coming at me. And like in survival situations in the woods, in the night, when the lights go out and you hear a scream in the woods, like, yeah, it's scary and unnerving, but still I know God's with me. Like, I know he's there and his will be done. And if it's my time to go, it's my time to go, and I need to be okay with that. So that's just, I don't know. That is what it is, I guess.
I appreciate that. Well, I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing a little bit about yourself, what you do, and we really appreciate you taking time. We mainly camp out of our vehicles, and we try to make things easier on ourselves, but you go out and do the hard things, and I really appreciate that, and I think we can all learn from each other, and that's why I wanted to have you on here to, tell us about who you are, what you do, because I find it interesting, and and like I said, I think we can all learn a little bit from each other. So I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing with us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Appreciate you guys for sure. And anytime either of you cruise through, as I'm now tongue tied at the end, but when you come through Idaho, or if you do, definitely give me a holler. We'll meet up. I'll show you around, do what I can. So I definitely appreciate you guys.
Love that. Nice. Same to you. Nice. If you ever venture east of where you live and come out here to this unknown Narnia, the unknown world, we'll be glad to show you around here too. We've got some beautiful spots. But nice. I want to thank everybody who came on tonight and commented and listened to us. Want everybody to know that this will be uploaded on all podcast platforms, and we are excited to share about what Edgar is doing out in Idaho. And make sure and follow him on Instagram. He's also on Facebook, and he has a very awesome YouTube channel, all at Angry Outdoors. Tony, hope you have a wonderful evening. It's good to see your face.
You too, buddy. It's
Enjoy the last of the snow before it melts. We're going to have some brutal cold weather before we have the next podcast. So it's going to be an interesting week to come. Until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Get outside, learn something new, and whatever you do, look out for number 1 and don't step in number 2. We're out.